Black Hearts in Battersea by Joan Aiken, Chapter 3. When Simon returned to Rose Alley that evening, it was late. He had been to the paint shop and bought beautiful new fat glistening tubes of paint, soft smooth brushes, and a glossy palette. Then he returned to Mr. Cobb's yard, where he was given about 5 jobs to do in quick succession, replacing a cracked panel on a barouche, mending a broken axle tree, turning a new spoke and putting it on a chariot wheel, shoeing a pony, and bending an iron wheel tread. By the end of this grueling stint, he was nearly dead of fatigue and ravenous, but it was worth it, for Mr. Cobb, slapping him on the shoulder, pronounced him a prime all-arounder, paid him a guinea then and there with the promise of as much work as he wanted, and invited him up for a dish of pigs, petitoes, and onions with Mrs. Cobb and young Miss Cobb, who lived in a little neat apartment up a flight of steps over the coach-house at the back of the yard. When he got home to Rose Alley, he found Ditto Twite swinging on the broken rails in front of the house.
"Why have you been gone such a long time?" she greeted him.
"Working," said Simon.
"Watch me do a headstand. What you been working at?"
"All sorts of things." He was very weary and disinclined for the company of this fidget of a child, but she seemed so delighted to see him that he lingered a minute or two, kindly admiring her antics.
"There's a circus comes to Southwark Friday week. Do you think they'd take me as a tumbler?"
"I'm not sure," Simon said cautiously. "Anyway, you don't want to leave home, do you?"
"Don't I just? Will you take me to the circus?"
"I may not still be here," said Simon, who had been offered lodgings at the Cobbs and was inclined to move nearer to Rivere's academy. Ditto's face fell and she gazed at him open-mouthed. "Where can I get a wash?" he went on.
"Wash is at the back,"
Ditto said automatically.
"Hot water's at twopence a bucket. Why won't you be here?"
"I may move to Chelsea." "I'm going in now. Goodbye." He ran whistling upstairs. From behind a closed door on the first floor came long, breathy, mournful notes. He heard Ditto scurry up behind him and burst through the door, crying, "Pa! Pa! Stop playing and listen!" Simon went on up to his own room, fed the kitten, and rummaged among the things in his pack for a small towel and a lump of soap he had made himself from wood ash and goose grease. Presently he ran downstairs again. As he neared the bottom, a voice above him called, "Hey!" He looked up and saw Ditto hanging upside down over the stair rail. She dropped a slice of bread and jam, which landed jam-side downward on his head.
"Now look what you've done, you wretched brat,"
said Simon crossly. He made a grab for her through the rail, but she retreated, screeching with laughter and mock alarm.
"Oh, you don't half look a sight. Jelly boy, jelly boy!"
"Just wait till I get you," Simon threatened.
"What's the matter? You're going to wash anyway."
Simon reflected that this was true, and went out to the wash-house, which was on a lean-to at the back of the house. A fire burned under a large copper and brick burner. The water in the copper was steaming. In a corner behind a screen stood a tin bath, with a shower pan supported on iron legs above it. Simon poured hot water into the shower pan, undressed, and stepped into the bath. He pulled the string of the shower, and hot water sluiced down on him and washed the jam out of his hair. He was soaping himself enjoyably when the wash-house door opened. "Go away!" Simon shouted apprehensively. "I'm in the bath!" Ditto's face came poking around the door.
"It's only me," she reassured him. Simon scowled over the top of the screen. "Well, be off! It's not polite to come in when someone's bathing."
She skipped across the room.
"Shall I take your clothes? You would look in that case then."
"Don't you dare!"
"Well, will you give me a ride tomorrow?"
"All right." She put his clothes down and retreated, turning in the doorway to say, "Pa says you're to come and have a dish of tea when you're ready." Simon hurried out of the bath as soon as she had gone, and put his clothes on again. While he was emptying the water in canfuls down a grated drain, he heard voices apparently coming from the roof. This puzzled him until he realized that the chimney of the copper acted as a conductor for sound. What he could hear was the voices of Mr. and Mrs. Twite in their upstairs parlour. "Very annoying that he found his way here," Mrs. Twite was saying irritably. Mr. Twite replied in a rumble of which nothing could be heard but the words, "Hello! Most unfortunate." "Eustace says," her voice came clearer,
as if she had stepped toward the chimney-piece. "Best stay here under our eye for the time." "I'm sure I don't care," her husband replied, rather shrilly. "It's only my house, after all. It's all one to me if Eustace and his ideas land us in the—" "Quiet, Abednego. Quiet, Abednego. It's only for 6 weeks or so in any case. Only till we can dispose of him by means of the dark dew. And you may be sure that we'll be handsomely rewarded when the cause triumphs." "Yes," he said sourly. "We haven't had any reward for our other trouble yet, have we? I'm put upon, that's what it is. I'm put upon. All I want is to follow art and play my hautboy, but what happens?" He must have been walking across the room, for his words became fainter, and Simon could hear nothing but a distant mumble in which the word "paint" was alone distinguishable. He returned to his room with all his suspicions aroused once more. What or who was the cause of the other trouble? And was he himself the object of the Twites' conversation? And who was Eustace? And even more mysterious, what was the dark dew by means of which somebody was to be disposed of? Poison? The Twites looked a shifty, heavy-cavey lot, but he found it hard to believe they were poisoners. The mournful music had begun again, but it stopped when he tapped at the Twites' door. Come in, my dear young feller," boomed Mr. Twite, who in daylight proved to be a scraggly individual, thin and bony, with a wisp of hair and a wisp of beard, and curiously wandering eyes that never stayed in one position very long. "Settling, are you?" he went on. "Capital, capital. All one happy family here, aren't we, Penny? Aren't we, Dido? Aren't we, Ella, my dear?" The young lady, addressed as Penny, replied listlessly, "Yes, Pa," and did not lift her eyes from a copy of The Gentlewoman's Magazine which she was studying. Dido, toasting bread at the fire, caught Simon's eye and pulled a face. Mrs. Twite, pouring hot water into a teapot, snapped, "Hold your hush, Abednego, and fetch the cordial." Mr. Twite meekly laid down the large wooden instrument on which he had been playing. Simon guessed it to be his hautboy, and took a dusty black bottle out of the cupboard. Mrs. Twite turned to Simon, all smiles. "Sit down, Mr. Thingamy, sit down. Don't stand on ceremony here. Ditto, move! And take a dish of tea, I hope. You'll take a dish of tea, I hope?" "Thank you, ma'am." Simon had already done very well at the Cobbs, but in order to be polite, he accepted tea and toast. "And a dash of the Mountain Dew in it?" said Mrs. Twite with the black bottle. "No, thank you," Simon said firmly. He wondered if this could be the dark dew, but decided it was not. After Mr. Twite had administered a large dram to himself and his lady, and a small one to Penelope, after a few sips of tea, Mr. Twite, who had been looking rather gloomy, cheered up amazingly and began singing, "Oh, it's drabbling in the dew that makes the barmaids fair, with their dewy eyes and their brassy hair." "Now, my dear boy," Mrs. Twite said to Simon, "we want to hear all about you." "Yes," agreed Mr. Twite, putting down the dew bottle. "We want to hear all about you." "All about you," muttered Penelope, without raising her eyes from the magazine, and even Dido piped up, "All about you," and dropped a fistful of toast crumbs down Simon's neck. "Oh, there's not much to tell," Simon began, but Mrs. Twite would have none of this. "Dear boy, there must be. Where have you come from? Who do you know? What are you going to do all day long in London?" Question by question, she drew from Simon all there was to know about him. At the age of 3 he had been found wandering in the village of Loose Chippings in Yorkshire. Nobody claimed him, and mysteriously he could not speak a word of English, so he was sent to the poor farm where unlucky orphans were starved and neglected by the overseer, Gluber, whose only interest was in the half-crown per head per week he was paid by the parish. Here Simon survived as best he could for 5 years. He would not have endured it so long, he said, had he not made a friend there whom he was reluctant to leave. Until the age of 8 he decided to run away and live by himself in the woods. "And that has been my life ever since," he concluded, "until last year when I met Until last year I met Dr. Field, and he said I should learn to paint, which I have long wanted to do."
"But what a romantic tale!" exclaimed Mrs. Twite,
casting her eyes up.
"Is it not, Abednego? Did you never hear what happened to your friend?"
"Oh, she's in London too," said Simon happily. "I had the good luck to see her today. But about Dr. Field, I wrote to him to this address, saying when I should arrive. Was my letter not delivered here?"
"Never, dear boy."
"And Dr. Field has not been here?"
Neither had nor heard of him," declared Mr. Twite. "Now, is not that a curious thing? But of course there are many, many Rosalias in London, and I dare say we shall find your Dr. Field is living in one of the others, and when you discover which one, why, then you will be happily reunited. Depend upon it. That is the explanation. Do you not agree, my dove?"
"Oh, undoubtedly," agreed Mrs. Twite. "But in the meantime, my dear Mr. Thingamy, you mustn't think of moving away. We've begun to look on you as one of us, haven't we, girls?"
"Yes," yawned Penelope, bored, looking at a picture of a lady's dolman with bulged retching.
"Besides, if you moved away and Dr. Field should come to make his way here, think what a misfortune if you missed one another."
"Then you are expecting him?" Simon said hopefully.
"Never heard of him till today, dear boy. But if you are looking for him, it stands to reason that he must be looking for you, doesn't it?"
"I suppose so," Simon said doubtfully. He glanced about, half hoping for some trace of Dr. Field's presence. The room was large and extremely shabby. It contained